At Thanksgiving dinner, my husband's CEO mother slid divorce papers across the table with a smile that could freeze champagne. "Sign these, Cassie. We'll make this quick." $50,000 to disappear quietly, Victoria Germaine announced, loud enough for both families to hear. "My son deserves better than a barista with delusions of adequacy." I signed without a word, then reached beneath my chair for the leather portfolio I'd prepared. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're a subscriber, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." When I slid it across to her, her perfectly painted lips went pale. Inside was proof that I'd already filed first, and that I owned 40% of her precious company. Thanksgiving dinner at the Germaine family estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. An opulent dining room with a table that seats 20, set with Hermes china and baccarat crystal. Both families present, the Germaines, old money, corporate dynasty, and the Holdens, middle class, warm, unpretentious. The Hermes turkey platter gleams under the chandelier as I watch Victoria Germaine adjust the divorce papers beside my plate, positioning them like they're part of the table setting. She's spent the last hour playing the gracious hostess, her Cartier bracelet catching light every time she gestures, her voice honey-sweet as she thanks everyone for joining our family for Thanksgiving. But I've seen the glances between her and Damien. The nods exchanged with Jeremy. The way her attorney, Margaret, sits too close to my seat, leather briefcase positioned by her feet. They think I don't know what's coming. Victoria stands, tapping her champagne flute with a sterling silver knife. The sound cuts through the murmur of post-meal conversation. My mother's hand finds mine under the table, squeezing gently. She doesn't know what's about to happen, but she's felt the tension crackling through this meal like static electricity. "Before we have dessert," Victoria begins, her voice carrying that boardroom authority she wields like a weapon, "I think it's time we address something that's been troubling our family for quite some time." My father's fork pauses halfway to his mouth. Evelyn's eyes narrow, her phone already angled discreetly toward the head of the table. "Cassie, dear," Victoria continues, and there's nothing dear about the way she says my name. It sounds like something stuck to the bottom of her Louboutin heel. "When you married my son 5 years ago, we welcomed you with open arms, despite your humble background." The despite lands like a slap. My mother's grip tightens. "We've been patient. We've waited for you to rise to the occasion, to become the kind of woman who could stand beside a Germaine. But let's be honest," she pauses, looking around the table as if gathering witnesses for a trial. "You're simply not equipped for this life. You have no business acumen, no social grace, no understanding of what it takes to be part of a family like ours." Damien won't meet my eyes. His jaw is set, his hands folded in his lap like a schoolboy awaiting instruction. Victoria reaches down and slides the cream-colored envelope across the mahogany table. It whispers against the wood, coming to rest directly in front of my plate, partially covering the gold-rimmed edge. "These are divorce papers," she announces, as if anyone in the room could miss that fact. "We've taken the liberty of having them prepared by our attorneys. The terms are more than generous, considering you brought nothing to this marriage. A one-time payment of $50,000, which is frankly more than you'd see in 5 years at that little coffee shop you used to work at." My sister Evelyn inhales sharply. My father's face has gone red, his hands clenching into fists. "All you need to do is sign," Victoria continues, pulling a Mont Blanc pen from her jacket pocket and placing it beside the envelope with ceremonial precision. "Sign, and walk away with some dignity intact. Refuse, and we'll drag this through the courts, exposing every inadequacy, every failure, every reason you were never good enough for my son." She smiles then, the expression of a woman who's never lost a negotiation in her life. "Your choice, Cassie. Make it now." The room has gone silent except for the ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. 20 pairs of eyes focus on me, some pitying, some curious, some gleaming with anticipated humiliation. I look at Damien. My husband of 5 years. The man who promised to stand by me, who swore his family's money didn't matter, who held me at night and whispered that I was enough. He still won't meet my eyes. I pick up the Mont Blanc pen. Victoria's smile widens. Jeremy leans forward slightly, his phone positioned in his shirt pocket, camera lens aimed directly at me. They're recording this. Of course they are. I flip through the papers quickly. Property division, nothing. Spousal support, denied. Custody of assets, laughable, since they've ensured I have none. Non-disclosure agreement, threatening, and finally, the signature line. I sign my name in smooth, practice strokes. Cassandra Marie Holden. Not Holden Germaine. Just Holden. I've been practicing this signature for 3 months. Victoria actually laughs, the sound sharp and triumphant. Well, that was easier than expected. I told you she'd fold immediately, Damien. She knows when she's outmatched. I need to get something from my coat, I say quietly, standing from the table. Oh, there's no need to, Victoria begins, but I'm already walking to the coat closet in the foyer. The leather portfolio is exactly where I left it, tucked inside my cashmere coat pocket. It's heavy with documents, with truth, with 3 months of meticulous preparation. When I return to the dining room, Victoria is already pouring herself more champagne, celebrating her victory. Damien has finally looked up, relief visible on his face. Jeremy is grinning openly. I place the portfolio on the table in front of Victoria with a soft thud that somehow sounds louder than her champagne flute tap. Your turn, I say simply. Victoria's perfectly microbladed eyebrows raise slightly. My turn for what? To read. She opens the portfolio with the same confidence she brought to this entire performance. Margaret, the attorney, leans in to look. The first document is my divorce filing. Dated November 18th, 6 days ago. Filed in New York County, not Connecticut, where they plan to control the proceedings. Victoria's smile freezes. The second document is the stock transfer proof. 40% of Germaine Industries shares, transferred to me by Damien's late grandmother, Eleanor Germaine, 2 years ago in my 3rd year of marriage. A gift Victoria never knew about because Eleanor despised her daughter-in-law and made me promise to keep it secret until the right moment. Victoria's face drains of color. The third document is the forensic accounting report showing how Damien and Jeremy have been embezzling from the company for 18 months, funneling money through shell corporations and offshore accounts. Margaret's hand flies to her mouth. The fourth document is the prenuptial agreement Victoria forced us to sign before the wedding, the one that states if either party commits fraud or theft of marital assets, the prenup is void and the injured party receives 75% of all shared property. Damien stands up so fast his chair tips backward. The fifth document is my counter-filing, not just for divorce, but for fraud, theft, and emotional damages. With Eleanor's shares, I have enough voting power to call for an emergency board meeting and investigation. And the final document, the one that makes Victoria's hands start shaking, is the letter from Eleanor Germaine's attorney, dated 1 week before her death, stating explicitly that Victoria should never have been named CEO, that the position was meant for someone with integrity and heart, and that if Eleanor's shares ever passed to someone worthy, that person should save the company from my daughter-in-law's corruption. Victoria looks up at me, and for the first time in 5 years, I see something in her eyes besides contempt. I see fear. Happy Thanksgiving, I say quietly. I believe we have a lot to discuss. The voice came through the heating vent in our penthouse like a stage whisper designed to carry. I was in the bedroom folding laundry, Damien's custom shirts that cost more than my monthly salary used to, when I heard his mother's voice drift up from his home office directly below. Thanksgiving is perfect. Both families there. Maximum humiliation. I froze, a silk brioni shirt hanging from my hands. Mom, I don't know if, that was Damien, his voice carrying that uncertain tone he only used with Victoria. You don't know? You don't know? Victoria's laugh was cold. Damien, darling, you've been complaining about her for 3 years. How she doesn't fit in. How she embarrasses you at company events. How she still thinks a gallery manager's salary makes her financially independent. I moved closer to the vent, pressing my ear against the ornate grating. She does try, Damien offered weakly. Trying is for children and pets, Victoria snapped. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. You're 31 years old, the VP of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and you're married to a woman who brings boxed wine to charity galas because she doesn't understand that Chateau Margaux isn't pretentious, it's civilized. That had happened once. 2 years ago. At a breast cancer fundraiser where I genuinely thought contributing wine was helpful. I'd learned my lesson from the horrified stares and Damien's tight-lipped silence on the drive home. Jeremy agrees with me, Victoria continued. He was here this morning. We've worked everything out with Margaret. Clean, simple, humiliating enough that she won't fight it. What if she does fight it? Damien asked. Another laugh. With what? The prenup makes sure she gets nothing. She has no assets, no real career, no leverage. She'll sign because she has no choice. And once she's gone, we can find you someone appropriate. Madeline Duff from the Hampton Duffs showed real interest at the autumn gala. My heart hammered against my ribs. The heating vent carried every word with crystal clarity. The Thanksgiving announcement is crucial, Victoria continued, her voice taking on that strategic tone she used in board meetings I'd watched from the back row. We need witnesses. Her family, our family, the attorney present. Public enough that she's too shocked to make a scene, but intimate enough that it feels personal. She'll be so humiliated she'll sign just to escape the room. And if she cries? Jeremy's voice joined the conversation. I hadn't realized he was there too. When she cries, Victoria corrected. I want her parents to see exactly how out of her depth their daughter has always been. Robert and Diane need to understand that their middle-class values don't translate to our world. That coffee shop mentality, work hard, be kind, everything will be fine. She practically spat the words. This isn't a small business in Hartford. This is Germaine Industries. Should I record it? Jeremy asked, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Absolutely not, Victoria said sharply. Margaret was very clear. No recordings, no photographs. We can't have evidence of how we're handling this. But feel free to remember every detail for later entertainment. They laughed together. All three of them. My husband, his mother, his brother. A conspiracy of cruelty planned over what sounded like mid-morning coffee. The divorce papers will be placed at her seat before dinner, Victoria continued. I'll make a small speech about family and standards and difficult decisions. Very gracious, very mature. Then you hand her the envelope, Damien. You'll say, Cassie, this is for the best. For both of us. You'll see that in time. What about her things? Damien asked. Pack them up next week. Send them wherever. I don't care. Victoria's voice was dismissive. The important thing is getting her signature while she's too shocked to think clearly. Once it's done, it's done. And Damien, you'll finally be free to marry someone who actually enhances the Germaine name instead of diminishing it. There was a pause. I held my breath, waiting for Damien to defend me. To say something, anything, that suggested he still cared about the woman he'd married in a small ceremony 5 years ago, the woman he'd promised his family's money didn't matter to. Okay, he said finally. Thanksgiving. I'll make sure she doesn't suspect anything. Good boy, Victoria cooed. Now, let's discuss the Madeline situation. Her father controls 3 major shipping routes we've been trying to access. I backed away from the vent slowly, the silk shirt still clutched in my hands. My reflection caught in the full-length mirror. I looked exactly the same as I had 5 minutes ago, but everything had changed. They were planning to divorce me at Thanksgiving dinner. In front of both families. With an attorney present. They'd crafted my humiliation like a corporate merger, complete with strategy and timing and contingency plans. I walked to the window, looking down at Greenwich Avenue 40 stories below. The November afternoon was gray, threatening rain. People moved along the sidewalks in expensive coats, carrying shopping bags from stores I'd learned the names of but never quite felt comfortable entering. 5 years ago, Damien had seemed different. Kinder. He'd come into the gallery where I worked, looking for art for his new apartment. We'd talked for hours about the paintings, about what made something beautiful versus what made it valuable. He'd asked me to dinner. Then another dinner. Then a weekend in the Berkshires where he'd kissed me beside a lake and said, "You're real. Everyone else in my life is performing. But you're real." I'd believed him. I'd believed him when he said his family would come around. When he said Victoria's coldness was just her way, that she'd warm up once she got to know me. When he said our love mattered more than social circles or bank accounts or the right breeding. I'd believed him when he slipped that ring on my finger and said, "You and me against the world." Apparently, the world had won. My phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn, "Lunch tomorrow? I miss your face." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Yes. Need to talk to you about something important." Because here's what Victoria Germaine didn't know. I wasn't the naive gallery girl she thought she was divorcing. I had information she didn't know I possessed. Resources she'd never suspected. And most importantly, I had something Victoria hadn't anticipated. I had 6 days to prepare. I walked to the closet and pulled down the box from the top shelf. Inside was the envelope Eleanor Germaine had given me 2 years ago, 1 month before she died. "When the time is right," she'd whispered, her papery hands gripping mine with surprising strength. "Victoria will show her true colors. And when she does, you open this. Promise me." I'd promised. I opened the envelope for the first time, my hands shaking slightly as I unfolded the documents inside. Stock certificates. 40% of Germaine Industries. Transferred to me, legally notarized, with a letter of intent from Eleanor stating explicitly why she'd chosen me over her own daughter-in-law. Because Victoria cares only for power, Eleanor had written in her elegant script. And Damien has never learned to stand up to his mother. But you, Cassandra, have integrity. You have heart. And when the time comes, you'll know what to do with this gift. Save my company from the woman who's corrupting it. Be the granddaughter I wish I'd had. I sat on the closet floor, papers spread around me, and smiled for the first time in months. Victoria wanted to humiliate me at Thanksgiving dinner? Perfect. I'd let her think she was winning right up until the moment I took everything. 5 years earlier. The gallery was quiet that Tuesday afternoon in October. Rain streaked the windows, blurring the Manhattan street outside into impressionist watercolors. I was cataloging a new collection of contemporary pieces when the door chimed, and Damien Germaine walked into my life wearing a charcoal Tom Ford suit and an uncertain smile. "I'm looking for something for my apartment," he said, shaking rain from his hair. "Something that doesn't look like it came from a corporate art consultant's catalog." I'd helped him for 3 hours that day. We talked about color theory and emotional resonance and why some art speaks to you while other pieces, no matter how technically perfect, leave you cold. He bought a small abstract piece by an unknown Brooklyn artist, not the expensive Hockney print I'd assumed he'd choose. "Dinner?" he asked as I wrapped the painting. "To celebrate my first non-committee-approved purchase in years?" 3 months later, he proposed on that same rainy corner outside the gallery. 6 months after that, we were married in a small ceremony that Victoria had boycotted, claiming a scheduling conflict with a board meeting that didn't exist. I should have seen the warning signs then. Year 1, the adjustment period. "You can't wear that to the foundation gala," Damien said, his eyes scanning my vintage dress, a beautiful emerald silk I'd found at a consignment shop in the village. "Why not?" "It's elegant." "It's used, Cassie. People will know. They always know." He opened his wallet and handed me his black Amex. "Go to Bergdorf's. Ask for Simone. Tell her you need something appropriate." Appropriate. That word would become a constant soundtrack to our marriage. The gala was my first real introduction to Victoria's world. She'd worn Valentino and diamonds that cost more than my parents' house. When Damien introduced us, She'd looked me up and down with the clinical assessment of someone evaluating livestock. How quaint, she'd said about my Bergdorf's dress that Simone had promised was perfect. Damien, darling, Madeline Duff is here. You remember Madeline from Yale? Her family just opened that new resort in Turks and Caicos. You two should catch up. She'd steered him away before I could respond, leaving me standing alone beside a champagne fountain, clutching a glass of something that cost more than my weekly salary. That night, Damien made love to me with an urgency that felt like apology. She'll warm up, he whispered. She's protective. She just needs time. I believed him because I wanted to. Year 2, the patterns emerge. Why did you tell that story about your father's hardware store? Damien asked in the car after a company dinner. His hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly. Because Richard asked about my family. I was being polite. You were being embarrassing. Nobody wants to hear about retail. Richard runs a venture capital firm worth $800 million. Hardware stores aren't, they're not the same. My father built a successful business from nothing. A successful business would be worth discussing. A small-town hardware store is just. He trailed off, but the silence finished his sentence. Just nothing. That year, I started measuring my words at events. Started monitoring my stories, my jokes, my casual mentions of my life before Germaine. Started taking up less space to fit into rooms that were never designed for someone like me. Victoria noticed. At Christmas dinner, she actually smiled at me for the first time. You're learning, she said, her hand cold on my arm. That's good. Damien needs a wife who understands her role. My role, apparently, was to be seen but barely heard. To wear the right clothes and attend the right events and laugh at the right moments without ever actually contributing anything substantial. Year 3, the isolation. My friends from the gallery stopped calling. Not because I stopped answering, though I did, increasingly, but because Damien had opinions about them. Alex is nice, but she's a bit much, don't you think? All those political rants. Do you really want to spend Saturday with people from your old job? It's just going to make you nostalgic for something that wasn't ever going to be a real career. Your college friends are sweet, but they don't understand our lifestyle. It's awkward for everyone. By the end of year 3, my social circle consisted entirely of Germaine-approved contacts. Women who lunched at the right restaurants and volunteered for the right charities and never, ever discussed anything that might be considered controversial or inappropriate. I'd stopped painting, my own hobby from before the marriage. The apartment's second bedroom, which was supposed to be my studio, became Damien's home office because you weren't really using it anyway. This was also the year Eleanor died. But before she did, she changed my life. I'd visited her regularly in her Upper East Side brownstone. Victoria rarely came, too busy, she claimed, though Eleanor told me the truth one afternoon over tea. Victoria married into this family for power, Eleanor said, her voice still sharp despite her 89 years. She never loved Stefan. She loved what he represented. And she's raising Damien and Jeremy the same way, to value appearances over authenticity, money over meaning. Damien's not like that, I'd protested weakly. Eleanor had looked at me with such sadness. Isn't he, dear? 2 weeks before she died, she called me to her brownstone. The documents were already prepared, her attorney present to witness the transfer. I'm giving you 40% of my shares in Germaine Industries, she said. Victoria has 35%. Stefan has 25%. With Eleanor's shares, you'll have more voting power than Victoria. More power than anyone except the board as a collective whole. Eleanor, I can't. You can and you will. Because I've watched you, Cassandra. I've watched you diminish yourself for my grandson. I've watched you try to become something you're not to please people who will never be pleased. And I've watched Victoria systematically destroy every good thing about Damien until he's become just another version of her. Her grip on my hand was surprisingly strong. When the time is right, and you'll know when that is, you use these shares. You save my company from Victoria's corruption. Promise me. I'd promised, though I couldn't imagine ever actually using them. Eleanor squeezed my hand tighter than her frail appearance suggested. Promise me something else, Cassandra. Promise that when the time comes, and you'll know when, you'll fight back. You'll use every resource I'm giving you to protect yourself. I didn't understand what she meant then. I wouldn't for another 2 years. Year 4, the dog comment. The breaking point, or what should have been the breaking point, happened at Damien's 30th birthday party. Victoria had organized it at the Greenwich estate, a lavish affair with 100 guests and a jazz quartet and waiters in white gloves. I'd spent weeks planning the perfect gift, a first edition of The Great Gatsby, Damien's favorite book, which I'd hunted down through rare book dealers and paid for with money saved from the small freelance consulting I did for my old gallery. He opened it in front of a crowd of colleagues, barely glancing at the inscription I'd written inside. That's thoughtful, he said with the enthusiasm usually reserved for socks. His mother had given him a vintage Patek Philippe watch worth $60,000. She'd presented it with a speech about legacy and excellence and carrying on the family tradition. Later, after too much wine, Damien was holding court with his business school friends near the pool house. I'd gone to get my wrap from inside when I heard Jeremy's voice carrying across the patio. How do you keep her in line, man? If I had a wife, she'd be spending money and causing problems. It's about consistency, Damien said, and I froze in the doorway, hidden by shadows. Like training a dog. Clear boundaries, immediate corrections when she steps out of line, rewards when she behaves. Laughter erupted. You're joking, right? That was Stefan, one of his Yale friends. Not really. Women need structure. Cassie used to have all these opinions about art and culture and politics. Now she knows to keep quiet unless she's asked directly. Took a while, but consistency works. More laughter. I stood there in the darkness, my cashmere wrap slipping from my numb fingers. Marriage is about management, Damien continued, warming to his theme. You manage expectations, manage behavior, manage outcomes. She's much better now than she was when we started. Still has moments, but overall, significant improvement. I left the party early, claiming a headache. Damien came home at 2 a.m, stumbling drunk into bed without noticing I'd been crying. Year 5, the present. By year 5, I'd become a ghost in my own life. The woman who'd spent 3 hours discussing art with a stranger in a rainy gallery had been replaced by someone who spoke in careful sentences, who wore approved colors, who laughed at appropriate volumes. But ghosts have one advantage. No one notices when they're watching. When they're listening. When they're gathering evidence for the haunting to come. 6 months before Thanksgiving. The first discovery was almost accidental. I'd been looking for the insurance papers for my car, a modest Audi A4 that Damien had finally agreed I could have after 3 years of taking Ubers everywhere, when I found the Tiffany receipt in his desk drawer. Diamond tennis bracelet. $8,400. Purchased April 15th. My birthday was April 12th. He'd given me a gift card to SoulCycle that year, saying he thought I might want to work on my fitness, since his mother had commented on my weight at Easter dinner. I'd never seen a tennis bracelet. Not on my wrist, certainly. I took a photo of the receipt with my phone, carefully replacing it exactly where I'd found it, angled the same way, under the same stack of business cards. Then I sat on the floor of his office for 10 minutes, breathing steadily, reminding myself not to react. Not yet. The next discovery came 2 weeks later. Our credit card statement arrived, the one for the card Damien insisted we keep for household expenses, but that somehow never showed my purchases, only his. The Pierre Hotel. Le Bernardin. Agent provocateur. Thousands of dollars on a life I wasn't living. A woman I'd never been. All charged while he was supposedly at a medical technology conference in Boston. A conference I'd checked, he'd never registered for it. I photographed every page of the statement, uploaded them to a new cloud account I created with an email address he didn't know existed, email protected. Eleanor's words echoed in my mind, when the time is right. Maybe the time was getting closer than I'd thought. 4 months before Thanksgiving. I'm going to the Hamptons with Jeremy this weekend, Damien announced over breakfast. Bachelor party for Stefan's friend. You understand. I nodded, spreading jam on my toast with careful precision. Of course. Have fun. What I didn't tell him was that Evelyn had invited me to stay with her friend in Greenwich Village for the same weekend. What I didn't mention was that her friend's apartment had a perfect view of the street below. And from that window, you could see quite a lot of interesting things. Like my husband's car parked outside a townhouse at 2 in the morning on Saturday night. A townhouse that definitely wasn't in the Hamptons. I'd watched him emerge at dawn with a woman I didn't recognize. Petite, dark-haired, wearing his Yale t-shirt and not much else. She'd kissed him goodbye on the stoop, her hand lingering on his chest. Who is that? Evelyn had asked, her voice tight with anger on my behalf. I don't know yet, I said, snapping photos with my phone's zoom lens. But I will. Her name was Madeline Duff. I found out by reverse searching the townhouse address. It belonged to the Duff Family Trust. A few strategic social media searches later, and there she was, Madeline Duff, 29, Yale alumna, junior partner at her family's investment firm, recently featured in Town and Country's 30 Under 30 list. The same Madeline Victoria had mentioned during that overheard conversation. The Hampton Duffs showed real interest. Of course. I'd been seeing Madeline at company events for the past year, always positioned near Damien, always laughing at his jokes, always wearing clothes that cost more than my monthly gallery salary used to. Victoria had introduced us once at a summer gala, her smile sharp as she'd said, "Madeline, this is Damien's wife, Cassie. She used to work at a gallery before the marriage." Used to. As if I'd died instead of just stopped working. 3 months before Thanksgiving. The next morning, while Damien slept off his scotch, I made the first call that would unravel his life. I started taking walks in the afternoon, sometimes for hours. Damien thought I'd finally taken his advice about exercise. Victoria commented approvingly that I looked less soft at a company dinner. What I was actually doing was meeting with attorneys. The first 3 were disasters. They looked at the prenup, the one Victoria's lawyers had drafted, the one that gave me virtually nothing, and politely suggested I'd be lucky to walk away with $50,000 and my car. The 4th attorney was different. Caroline Shin practiced out of a modest office in Midtown, but her credentials were anything but modest. Harvard Law, 15 years specializing in high-net-worth divorces, and a reputation for taking on impossible cases and winning them. "This prenup is interesting," she said, studying it over her reading glasses. "Very thorough. Victoria Germaine's attorneys did excellent work protecting the family assets. So I'm stuck with nothing." I didn't say that. Caroline looked up at me with sharp, intelligent eyes. "Tell me something. Have you noticed any unusual financial activity? Large transfers, hidden accounts, anything that might constitute fraud or embezzlement?" I thought about the credit card charges. The mysterious cash withdrawals I'd started noticing. The offshore account statements I'd found hidden in Damien's gym bag last month, accounts not mentioned in any of our joint financial disclosures. "Maybe," I said carefully. Caroline smiled. "Then we might have something to work with. Because if your husband or his family has committed financial fraud during your marriage, this prenup becomes void. Every clause, every provision, every careful protection Victoria's lawyers built, it all disappears." "How do we prove fraud?" "Very, very carefully," Caroline said. "And very, very thoroughly. Are you willing to do the work?" I thought about the dog training comment. About diminishing myself for 5 years. About becoming so invisible I was practically see-through. "Yes," I said. "I'm willing." 2 months before Thanksgiving. The evidence gathering became my full-time job, though no one knew it. While Damien thought I was having lunch with approved friends or shopping at approved stores, I was actually doing something far more interesting. I was learning to hack. Not sophisticated cybercrime, nothing that would get me arrested. Just simple things like password recovery, cloud account access, email forwarding rules that Damien would never notice. His laptop synced to his phone, which synced to the tablet he kept in his office, which backed everything up to iCloud. Once I had his iCloud password, easily obtained by watching over his shoulder while pretending to bring him coffee, I had access to everything. Text messages with Jeremy, Mom says Thanksgiving is D-Day. Can't wait to see the look on her face. Emails with Madeline, after the divorce, we can finally be public. My mother already approves. Says you're exactly the kind of woman a Germaine should marry. Photos he thought were private, him and Madeline at what looked like a very romantic dinner, her hand displaying that $8,400 tennis bracelet I'd never received. But the real treasure was the financial documents. Jeremy and Damien had been systematically moving money out of Germaine Industries for 18 months. Small amounts at first, $10,000 here, $25,000 there, but increasingly bold. They'd created shell corporations with deliberately boring names: Northeast Property Management LLC, Hartford Consulting Services, Gemini Investment Holdings. The money flowed from Germaine Industries to these fake companies, then immediately to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Over 18 months, they'd stolen nearly $3 million. I documented everything. Screenshots, PDF downloads, exported spreadsheets, email chains discussing how to borrow from the company without anyone noticing and replace it before the annual audit. They were planning to replace it with my divorce settlement money. I realized that when I found Jeremy's email to Damien, once Cassie signs the divorce papers and Mom pays her off, we can funnel that $50,000 back into the company books to cover some of the gaps. No one will ever know. They were going to steal from the company, pay me off with what was technically company money, and then use my payout to cover their theft. Elegant, really. Except for one thing. I wasn't going to sign their divorce papers. I was going to file my own. 6 weeks before Thanksgiving. I need you to file something for me, I told Caroline Chen in her office. But the timing is very specific. I showed her everything, the stock certificates from Eleanor, the evidence of embezzlement, the proof of Damien's affair, the offshore accounts, the shell corporations. Caroline's eyes widened as she reviewed each document. Cassie, this is extraordinary work. You've built a complete case. I want to file for divorce on November 18th. 6 days before Thanksgiving. Before they serve me their papers. But I don't want them to know I've filed until Thanksgiving dinner. That's extremely risky. If they find out early. They won't. Victoria is too confident. Damien is too distracted by Madeline. And Jeremy is too stupid to check court records. I leaned forward. I want to file first because according to the prenuptial agreement clause you showed me, whoever files first in cases of proven financial fraud determines the asset division terms. I looked directly at Caroline. I filed first. Which means my terms take precedence over anything you plan tonight. Caroline was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, a sharp, professional smile that reminded me why she had a reputation for winning impossible cases. Let's destroy them, she said. 8 months before Thanksgiving. The night that changed everything started like so many others. Damien came home late from drinks with clients, his tie loosened, cologne mixed with something sweeter, perfume that definitely wasn't mine. He poured himself a scotch from the Macallan bottle in the living room, the expensive one Victoria had given him for Christmas. I was in the kitchen, cleaning up from a dinner I'd eaten alone, when I heard him on the phone in his office. The door was ajar, just slightly, and his voice carried that particular quality it got after several drinks, louder than he realized, more honest than he intended. No, she doesn't suspect anything, he was saying. I told you, she's completely oblivious. Too busy trying to please everyone to notice what's actually happening. I set down the dish I was washing, water dripping from my hands. Madeline, baby, I know it's frustrating. But we have to be patient. The prenup is ironclad. If I file for divorce without cause, she could actually contest it. But if she agrees to sign, if we make it her idea somehow, everything's clean. Fast. Final. My heart hammered, but I stayed perfectly still, listening. My mother has a plan. She always does. Thanksgiving dinner, both families present, divorce papers presented as a fait accompli. Cassie will be so humiliated, so desperate to escape the situation, she'll sign anything. Then you and I can finally be together publicly. Mother already approves of you, says you're what she always hoped I'd marry. There was a pause while Madeline responded. I know I said 6 months ago it would be soon. But these things take time. We need to make sure she gets nothing, absolutely nothing. She came into this marriage with nothing, and she'll leave with nothing. That's only fair, right? I mean, what has she actually contributed? Some mediocre art opinions and constant embarrassment at social events? He laughed at something Madeline said. The sound made my stomach turn. God, I can't wait to not have to pretend anymore. Do you know how exhausting it is? Coming home to someone so inadequate. Someone so desperate for approval she'll accept any scraps I throw her way. It's pathetic, really. I backed away from the kitchen, my feet silent on the hardwood floors. In the bedroom, I sat on the edge of our bed, the bed where he'd held me on our wedding night and promised forever, and stared at my hands. The wedding ring felt heavy suddenly. Or maybe I was finally feeling its weight after 5 years of numbness. I should have cried. Part of me expected to cry. But instead, something else happened. Something cold and clear and almost mathematical clicked into place in my mind. If he wanted to play games, if Victoria wanted to orchestrate my humiliation, if they all thought I was too stupid to fight back, fine. Let them think that. Let them keep thinking that right up until the moment I destroyed them. I walked back to the kitchen, made myself a cup of tea, and waited. 20 minutes later, Damien emerged from his office, loosening his collar further. Still up? He asked, surprised to see me at the kitchen table. Couldn't sleep, I said, my voice soft, compliant. The voice he'd trained into me. How were drinks with the clients? Fine. Boring, actually. Henderson is tedious when he's had too much wine. He poured himself water, his back to me. You should get to bed. You look tired. Damien, I said, and he turned, eyebrows raised at the tentative tone I'd perfected. I've been thinking. About us. About our future. He stiffened slightly. What about it? I just wonder sometimes if I'm enough for you. If I'm the kind of wife you really need. I let my voice crack just slightly, as if the admission was painful. Your mother is so accomplished, and Madeline Duff at the company events always seems so confident and sophisticated, and I. Madeline? His face went carefully blank. Why are you bringing up Madeline? I just noticed you talk to her a lot at events. She seems very impressive. Yale graduate, family business, the kind of background that fits better with yours. I looked down at my tea, the perfect picture of insecurity. Sometimes I worry that you regret marrying someone like me. Someone so ordinary. I could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. He thought I was spiraling into self-doubt. He thought I was breaking down on my own, making his job easier. Cassie, he said, sitting across from me with what he probably thought was a sympathetic expression. You can't compare yourself to other people. That's not healthy. But am I enough? I pressed, letting my eyes fill with tears that were real, not from sadness, but from rage I was carefully banking. Am I the kind of wife a Germaine should have? He reached across the table, patting my hand in that condescending way he developed over the years. You're fine. You just need to stop overthinking things. Maybe you should talk to someone. A therapist. Mother knows an excellent one who works with women who struggle with confidence issues. Maybe you're right, I whispered. I'm sorry. I don't know why I get like this. It's okay. He stood, clearly eager to end this conversation. Get some sleep. Things will look better in the morning. They always do. After he went to bed, I sat at that kitchen table for another 2 hours. My laptop open, searching for information. Forensic accountants. Divorce attorneys who specialized in prenuptial agreement challenges. Laws regarding fraud and embezzlement in Connecticut versus New York. And I thought about Eleanor's gift. The 40% of shares sitting in a safe deposit box, legally mine but unknown to Victoria or Damien or anyone else in the family. 40%. More voting power than Victoria's 35%. Enough to call emergency board meetings. Enough to demand investigations. Enough to expose every dirty secret the Germaines had buried under their luxury lifestyle and old money respectability. My phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn, "Can't sleep. Want to come over? I'll make pancakes." I grabbed my coat and keys. An hour later, I was sitting in my sister's tiny Brooklyn kitchen, telling her everything. The overheard conversation. Damien's phone call with Madeline. The Thanksgiving plan. The years of systematic diminishment. "What are you going to do?" Evelyn asked when I finished. "I'm going to beat them at their own game," I said. "But I need help. Anything. Name it. I need you to document everything at Thanksgiving dinner. Every word Victoria says, every moment of what they try to do to me. Can you do that without being obvious?" Evelyn smiled grimly. "I've been waiting 5 years for you to ask me to help you take down that family. My phone will be recording the whole thing." Over the next few months, with Evelyn's help and Caroline Chen's legal expertise, I built my case. But the real turning point, the moment I knew I had them, came 6 weeks before Thanksgiving. I found the embezzlement evidence in Jeremy's email account. He'd been sloppy, forwarding documents to his personal Gmail that outlined every illegal transfer, every shell corporation, every offshore account. More importantly, I found an email from Victoria. "Boys," it read, "I know about the borrowing from the company accounts. I'm not pleased, but I understand cash flow challenges. However, this needs to be resolved before the annual audit. The $50,000 we're paying Cassie to go away should help cover the gaps. Make sure those funds are properly redirected once she signs. And next time, be more careful. I can't protect you if you're sloppy." Victoria knew. She was complicit. She'd actively helped them hide the theft. I forwarded the email to my encrypted account, to Caroline's secure server, to 3 different cloud storage systems. Then I smiled. Because now I had everything I needed. Not just to divorce Damien. Not just to expose the affair. But to destroy the entire carefully constructed Germaine empire built on fraud and arrogance and the assumption that people like me were too stupid to fight back. They wanted to humiliate me at Thanksgiving dinner? Perfect. I'd let them try. And then I'd show them what real humiliation looked like. November 18th, 6 days before Thanksgiving. Caroline Chen's office smelled like leather and expensive coffee. I sat across from her desk while she reviewed the final documents, her reading glasses perched on her nose, a slight smile playing at her lips. "This is bulletproof," she said finally, setting down the last page. "Stock certificates authenticated and notarized. Forensic accounting showing systematic embezzlement totaling $2.7 million over 18 months. Evidence of adultery with timestamp metadata. Offshore account documentation. Email chain proving Victoria's knowledge and complicity in the fraud." She looked up at me with something like admiration. "You've done in 6 months what takes most people years. How did you get access to Jeremy's personal email? He uses his birthday as his password for everything. Including the guest Wi-Fi at the Greenwich house that I connected to during Sunday dinners." I shrugged. Rich people assume they're too smart to be hacked. They're not. Caroline laughed, a sharp sound of appreciation. "The filing goes through today. New York County, not Connecticut. By the time they realize what's happened, you'll have legal precedents. Your filing predates anything they submit by at least 6 days. And the prenup? Void. Completely void." Caroline tapped the screen. "The fraud clause is explicit. If either party commits financial fraud or theft of marital assets, the prenup is nullified. She pulled out a calculator, fingers flying across the keys. Your husband and his brother stole from a company you now own 40% of. That's theft of your assets. Combined with his adultery and Victoria's conspiracy to defraud you of proper divorce terms, you're entitled to 75% of shared marital property and significant damages. The Greenwich penthouse alone is worth $4.2 million. Jointly held investment accounts total $1.8 million. The vacation property in Martha's Vineyard adds another $2.3 million. His retirement accounts bring us to roughly $3 million more. 75% of approximately $11.3 million in shared assets is $8.475 million, I said quietly. Caroline's smile widened. Exactly. Plus, with Eleanor's shares, you'll have voting power to call for a board investigation into the embezzlement. Victoria can be removed as CEO for knowingly concealing fraud. The company itself is worth roughly $340 million. Your shares alone are worth $136 million. The numbers were staggering. I'd gone from a woman about to be paid off with $50,000 to a woman worth over $140 million. Sign here, Caroline said, sliding the papers across her desk. And here. And initial here. Once this is filed, there's no going back. They'll come after you with everything they have. I picked up her Mont Blanc pen, heavier than the one Victoria would give me in 6 days, and signed my name. Cassandra Marie Holden. Not Holden Germaine. Just Holden. Taking back the name I'd lost piece by piece over 5 years. It's filed, Caroline said, uploading the documents to the court system with a few keystrokes. As of 2:47 p.m., November 18th, you're officially the plaintiff in Holden vs. Germaine. Congratulations. I sat back in the leather chair, feeling like I should feel different. Triumphant, maybe. Or terrified. Instead, I just felt clear. Focused. Now what? I asked. Now you prepare for war. November 19th, 5 days before Thanksgiving. The safe deposit box at Chase Manhattan was small but sufficient. Inside, I placed copies of everything: the divorce filing, the forensic accounting reports, the email evidence, the offshore account statements, Eleanor's original letter and stock certificates. The key went on my keychain, disguised among the others. Just another piece of metal Damien would never think to question. At home, I began the subtle work of preparation. I packed a go bag, clothes, toiletries, passport, cash, laptop, and stored it at Evelyn's apartment in Brooklyn. If things went badly at Thanksgiving, if Victoria somehow managed to lock me out or call the police or manufacture some crisis, I'd have everything I needed to disappear for a few days. I opened a new checking account at a different bank, transferring the small freelance income I'd been squirreling away. Only $8,000, but it was mine. Earned from art consulting I'd done quietly for galleries that still remembered me from before I became Mrs. Damien Germaine. The account was in my maiden name. Holden. The statements went to a P.O. box near Caroline's office. November 20th, 4 days before Thanksgiving. You seem different, Damien said over breakfast, looking up from his tablet. Happier, almost. Just excited for Thanksgiving, I said, pouring his coffee exactly how he liked it, 3/4 full, room for cream, served at precisely 180 degrees. Having both families together. It'll be nice. He smiled, the expression not quite reaching his eyes. Yes. It will be memorable. I watched him text under the table, his thumbs moving rapidly. Probably Madeline. Probably telling her how well his wife was taking the bait, how unsuspecting I remained. Let him think that. After he left for work, I spent 3 hours with a private investigator named Marcus Hayes. Caroline had recommended him, former FBI, specialized in digital forensics and surveillance. I need you at the Germaine estate on Thanksgiving, I said. Hidden, recording everything. Audio and video if possible. Marcus reviewed the floor plan of the Greenwich house that I'd photographed. Exterior cameras will be tricky with their security system, but I can position long-range audio equipment in the garden. Should pick up everything in the dining room through the French doors. Why do you need external recording if your sister will have her phone? He asked. Backup. If Victoria's lawyers try to claim the phone recording was illegal or doctored, I want independent verification. Plus, Evelyn might be ejected from the room. You won't be. Smart. He named his price, $5,000 for the day. I paid him in cash from my secret account. November 21st, 3 days before Thanksgiving. The boutique in Soho was the kind of place I'd stopped entering years ago. Too trendy, too young, too much a reminder of the person I used to be before I started wearing beige and navy and appropriate colors. But I wasn't dressing for Victoria today. I was dressing for myself. The dress I chose was burgundy silk, elegant but not showy. Expensive but not flashy. The kind of dress that said, I'm comfortable in my own skin, without screaming for attention. I also bought a leather portfolio, Bottega Veneta, beautiful craftsmanship, sturdy enough to hold significant documents. It cost $2,400. I paid for it with the credit card that only I could access, the one Damien didn't know existed. The portfolio would hold my evidence at Thanksgiving dinner. It needed to look expensive, professional, important. The kind of thing that commands respect when placed on a table. November 22nd, 2 days before Thanksgiving. Sunday dinner at the Greenwich estate was mandatory. Every week, unless you were traveling for business, you appeared at Victoria's table at 7 p.m. sharp. I drove there alone. Damien had gone early to help with some preparations. More likely, he was being coached on his performance for Thursday. The dining room was already set for Thanksgiving when I arrived. Hermes plates, baccarat crystal, silver from Cristofel that had been in the Germaine family for 4 generations. My seat was at the far end of the table, opposite Victoria. The least important position, reserved for those who didn't matter. I counted the place settings. 18. Both families plus Victoria's attorney, Margaret, and what looked like extra seats for Jeremy's girlfriend and possibly Madeline. Admiring the setup? Victoria appeared beside me, her perfume, something by Clive Christian that cost $2,000 a bottle, announcing her presence before her voice did. It's beautiful, I said truthfully. You always create such elegant events. Thanksgiving is important for family, she said, her hand cold on my shoulder. For being grateful for what we have. For recognizing when it's time to make difficult changes for everyone's benefit. The subtext was clear. She was already savoring Thursday's humiliation. I couldn't agree more, I said, meeting her eyes with a smile. I'm very grateful for this family. You've all taught me so much. About cruelty, I didn't add. About underestimation. About how dangerous it is to assume the quiet person in the room isn't paying attention. Victoria smiled back, completely missing the edge in my voice. You're learning, Cassie. Finally learning your place. Yes, I said softly. I finally understand exactly where I stand. Stefan sat in a leather armchair reading the Wall Street Journal, or pretending to. I noticed he hadn't turned a page in several minutes. When Victoria made another cutting remark about appropriate standards, I caught him closing his eyes briefly, as if in pain. Maybe he wasn't as complicit as I'd thought. November 23rd, 1 day before Thanksgiving. I spent Wednesday alone in the penthouse, going through every room one final time. This apartment that had become my prison would soon be gone from my life. Part of the settlement would require Damien to buy out my share or sell it entirely. I wouldn't miss it. The stark modern furniture Victoria had selected. The white walls that weren't allowed to hold my colorful paintings. The kitchen where I'd cooked 1,000 meals for a man who'd barely tasted them. But I would take something with me. In the guest bedroom closet, hidden behind winter coats, I'd stored my paintings. The ones I'd created before the marriage, the ones I'd made in secret during it. 23 canvases of color and emotion and everything I'd had to suppress to survive in this family. I packed them carefully, loading them into my car under cover of darkness. They went to a storage unit in Queens, paid for a year in advance with cash. Everything else, the clothes Victoria had approved, the jewelry Damien had given me for show, the books I'd stopped reading because they weren't intellectual enough, could stay. None of it was mine anyway. It belonged to the woman they'd tried to make me become. For just a moment, standing in that foyer with my last box of paintings, I wondered if I was making a mistake. If I should just sign their papers and disappear quietly. Then I remembered the dog training comment. The barista with delusions. 5 years of systematic erasure. The doubt evaporated like morning fog. That night, I slept better than I had in 5 years. Tomorrow was Thanksgiving. Tomorrow, I was going to be grateful. 3 months before Thanksgiving, the summer gala. The company gala at the Greenwich Yacht Club should have been beautiful. Waterfront views, champagne fountains, a string quartet playing Vivaldi. Instead, it became another lesson in exactly how little the Germaines thought of me. I'd worn the dress Victoria herself had selected, a pale blush Armani that washed out my complexion but met her definition of appropriate. My hair was pulled back in the tight chignon she preferred. My jewelry was minimal, the pearl studs Damien had given me, nothing that might compete for attention. We'd barely arrived when Victoria steered Damien away. Richard Holbrook is here from the board. You need to talk to him about the Q3 projections. Cassie, dear, why don't you find the other wives? I'm sure they're discussing the charity auction. I was dismissed like hired help. I found myself standing alone near the bar when a genuine smile approached. Patricia Morrison, wife of one of the board members, someone who'd always been kind to me. Cassie. I haven't seen you in months. How are you? We talked for maybe 10 minutes. Real conversation about art exhibitions and books we'd read and her daughter's college applications. It felt like breathing after being underwater. Then Victoria appeared, her hand tight on my elbow. Cassie, darling, could I borrow you? Her smile was poison sweet. She steered me away from Patricia with practiced efficiency. Once we were alone near the coat check, her voice dropped to a hiss. What did I tell you about monopolizing people's time? I was just talking to Patricia. You were trapping her in a conversation she was too polite to escape. Did you see her eyes glazing over? She was looking for an exit, and you just kept talking. Victoria's fingers dug into my arm. This is exactly what I mean about social awareness. You don't understand your place in these situations. My place. Always my place. Patricia and I were having a nice conversation. No, dear. Patricia was being polite while you demonstrated why people find you exhausting. She released my arm, smoothing her dress. Go to the ladies' room. Fix your hair, it's coming loose. And when you return, stay with the wives. Don't initiate conversations with board members or their spouses. Is that clear? In the bathroom, I stared at my reflection. My hair looked fine. Victoria just wanted to punish me for 15 minutes of genuine human connection. When I returned, Damien was holding court with a group of executives. I approached quietly, standing just outside the circle. And that's when I realized the key to a successful marriage is managing expectations, he was saying, whiskey in hand, his voice carrying that performative quality he used when trying to impress. You set the tone early. You establish what's acceptable and what isn't. Consistency is everything. Jeremy laughed. Sounds like you're training a golden retriever, not living with a wife. Not far off, honestly. Damien's grin was sharp. Cassie used to have all these opinions about art and culture. Would launch into these tangents at dinners about symbolism and artistic merit. Now she knows better. She's learned to read the room, to understand when her input is valuable versus when it's just noise. The executives laughed uncomfortably. One of them, Thomas Beck, caught my eye over Damien's shoulder. His expression was embarrassed for me. I turned and walked away before Damien could see me. Before anyone could witness the tears threatening to spill. In the parking lot, I called Evelyn. Come get me, I said when she answered. Please. She arrived in 20 minutes. I told her everything on the drive back to Brooklyn. "Why do you stay?" she asked finally, her hands tight on the steering wheel. "I don't know anymore," I whispered. But that was a lie. I knew exactly why I was staying. I was staying to gather evidence. To build my case. To wait for the perfect moment to strike back. 10 weeks before Thanksgiving, the opera. At the opera 2 weeks later, Victoria introduced Madeline Duff to our box with theatrical precision. "Madeline, you remember Damien, of course. And this is his wife, Cassie." The pause before wife was deliberate. Madeline's smile was pitying. "Cassie used to work at an art gallery," Victoria continued, making my former career sound like a lemonade stand. "Before she married into the family. Now she keeps busy with, well, I'm sure she finds ways to occupy her time." Madeline nodded politely while her hand, adorned with that $8,400 tennis bracelet, rested on the edge of our box, visible to anyone who cared to look. I excused myself to the restroom and photographed the bracelet from 3 angles. Added the photos to my evidence file with the date and location metadata intact. When I returned, Madeline was leaning close to Damien, laughing at something he'd said. Victoria watched them with open approval, then caught my eye and smiled. She wanted me to see this. Wanted me to understand that Madeline was my replacement. I smiled back and took my seat, making a mental note to add this incident to my deposition. 4 weeks before Thanksgiving, the charity gala. The cruelty reached its peak at the autumn charity gala, an event I'd actually helped organize. I'd spent weeks coordinating with the caterers, the decorators, the auction items. Victoria gave the opening speech. "I want to thank everyone who made tonight possible. Our event coordinator, Melissa Park, did an extraordinary job with the logistics. Our volunteers were tireless. And of course, my family, particularly my sons Damien and Jeremy, for their generous donations. No mention of me. Not a word." After the speech, I stood near the silent auction table when I heard Victoria's voice from the powder room, the door slightly ajar, her words carrying clearly. "The wife? Oh, she's harmless. Tried to involve herself in planning tonight's event, but we had to redirect her to simpler tasks. Name tags, that sort of thing. She means well, but she simply doesn't have the capacity for real event management. I'd organized the entire logistics. Melissa had handled only the decorations." Another woman's voice: "That seems harsh, Victoria." Harsh? It's realistic. Some people are suited for complex undertakings. Others are suited for support roles. Cassie serves her purpose, I suppose. She keeps a nice home for Damien. Though even that has been challenging, I've had to provide her with my housekeeper's number several times when dinner parties didn't meet standards. I'd cooked every dinner party myself. Victoria had never once offered her housekeeper's services. But I didn't confront her. I simply added this incident to my mental file, another piece of evidence showing the systematic degradation I'd endured. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, the final Sunday dinner. The final escalation came at Sunday dinner, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. The family was gathered, plus Madeline as a special guest Victoria had invited without warning me. "Cassie," Victoria said over the main course, "Madeline was just telling us about her family's new resort development in Costa Rica. Fascinating business venture. Though I suppose the intricacies of international real estate development are a bit beyond your realm of understanding. Actually, I studied economics as part of my art history degree." Art history. Victoria's laugh was sharp. "Yes, that's certainly practical for understanding resort development complexities. Madeline, dear, tell us more about the financing structure." Madeline launched into a detailed explanation while Victoria nodded approvingly. Damien listened with rapt attention, asking intelligent questions, his body angled toward Madeline instead of me. I ate my dinner in silence, counting down. 14 days until Thanksgiving. 14 days until I could stop being quiet. After dinner, I helped clear the table, as I always did, while the Germaine men retired to the study for brandy and cigars. In the kitchen, I overheard Victoria speaking to someone on her phone. Thursday in 2 weeks. Yes, both families. She won't see it coming, she's completely oblivious. Margaret, I need you there by 6. Bring the papers. We'll serve them between the main course and dessert. Maximum impact, minimum opportunity for her to make a scene. I didn't drop anything this time. My hand stayed steady as I continued loading the dishwasher. Just like they thought she'd clean up me in 2 weeks. But Victoria Germaine had made one critical miscalculation. She'd assumed I was still the insecure woman who'd married into this family 5 years ago. The one desperate for approval, willing to shrink herself to fit. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone who'd learned to be patient. Someone who'd documented every cruelty, every humiliation, every piece of evidence. Someone who was about to burn their entire empire to the ground. November 18th, 6 days before Thanksgiving, 10:47 p.m. I couldn't sleep. The divorce papers had been filed that afternoon, sitting in the New York County court system like a ticking bomb Victoria didn't know existed. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt restless. Damien was snoring softly beside me, his phone charging on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a notification, another text from Madeline, probably. He'd fallen asleep reading them, his passcode still active on the 30-minute timer before autolock. I watched the ceiling fan rotate slowly, counting the revolutions. 1, 2, 3. His phone buzzed again. 4, 5, 6. I turned my head slightly. The phone screen was visible from my angle. An email notification from Jeremy, subject, Thanksgiving logistics, final plan. My heart rate picked up. 7, 8, 9. Damien's breathing remained deep and even. I slid out of bed silently, my feet finding the cool hardwood floor without sound. Years of moving quietly through this apartment, trying not to disturb him, trying not to take up too much space, had taught me how to be invisible. I picked up his phone. The screen blazed to life, showing the email preview. Mom finalized everything. Thursday at 7:15 p.m., right after the blessing. She'll do the speech, you hand over the papers, Margaret is positioned to witness signature. Recording equipment is set, Margaret's briefcase has a camera. Mom wants documentation of her signing, willingly, in case she tries to contest later. After she signs and leaves, we celebrate. I'm bringing the crystal. My hands started shaking. I forced them still. I opened the full email on his phone, my thumbs moving quickly across the screen. The message was longer, more detailed. Damien, final walkthrough of Thursday's plan. 6 p.m., families arrive. Cassie plays hostess, let her, makes the contrast sharper later. 6:45 p.m., everyone seated. Mom has placed Cassie at the far end, Madeline in the middle section. Madeline doesn't know the full plan, but Mom briefed her to be visible and accomplished in conversation. 7 p.m., dinner served. Keep Cassie engaged in meaningless small talk. Don't let her get comfortable. 7:15 p.m., Mom stands, gives her speech. You stand, walk to Cassie's end of the table. Hand her the envelope. 7:16 p.m., Margaret offers the pen. Mom expects crying, possibly begging. Let it happen for 2 to 3 minutes max, then Mom will graciously offer the $50,000 settlement as comfort. 7:20 p.m., signature obtained. Margaret witnesses. Mom asks Cassie to take some time to process this, code 4, leave immediately. 7:25 p.m., Cassie exits. Car service is prearranged to take her to her parents' house in Hartford. 7:30 p.m., we toast your freedom. Mom already has the Chateau Latour 1982 ready. The plan is foolproof. She's been getting quieter, more compliant. By Thursday, she'll sign anything to escape. Also, Mom confirmed the $50,000 payout covers our Cayman account gap for Q4. Clean books, clean divorce, clean start. This is happening, brother. Thursday is your Independence Day. J. I read it 3 times, screenshotting each section, my phone hidden behind Damien's in case he woke. The screenshots went immediately to my encrypted cloud, to Caroline's secure server, to Evelyn's phone with a timestamp. But it was the attachment that made my blood turn to ice water. P.S. Attached is Mom's speech draft. She's been working on it for weeks. She's really excited about the barista with delusions line. Says it'll be the perfect opening. I opened the attachment. Victoria's speech was there in her precise, elegant handwriting, scanned and saved as a PDF. Good evening, family. Before we give thanks for our many blessings, I need to address something that has weighed heavily on my heart. 5 years ago, my son married a woman I hoped would rise to meet the standards of the Germaine family. A barista with dreams of significance, with delusions that love alone could bridge the gap between her ordinary background and our family's legacy. I gave her time. I gave her opportunities. I gave her every chance to prove she belonged in our world. But some people are simply not equipped for the lives they aspire to. Some people are meant for smaller lives. Smaller ambitions. And there's no shame in that, it's simply who they are. Cassie, dear, you are not a bad person. You are simply an ordinary person who found herself in an extraordinary situation. And it's time, for your sake and for Damien's, that we acknowledge this truth. You deserve a life that doesn't require you to constantly stretch beyond your capabilities. And my son deserves a partner who can stand beside him without compromise. So tonight, we're offering you a gift. The gift of release. The gift of returning to a life that fits. Papers have been prepared. Terms have been made generous. All you need to do is sign. The speech went on for another page. Each word was calculated to humiliate, to crush, to ensure I left that table broken. I took screenshots of every paragraph. Then I found something else in Damien's email, a message from Victoria sent earlier that day, after I'd already filed for divorce but before she knew. Damien, I spoke with our family attorney today about the prenup terms. He confirmed that as long as Cassie signs voluntarily in front of witnesses, she has no grounds to contest. The $50,000 is more than generous for someone who contributed nothing to this marriage. Margaret will ensure everything is documented properly. The briefcase camera will record her signing. Her family's presence will prevent any claims of coercion. We've thought of everything. After Thursday, the Germaine family will finally be rid of this embarrassing chapter. And you'll be free to marry someone appropriate. Madeline's father is already discussing the merger of our companies once you two are official. This divorce isn't just about removing Cassie, it's about positioning our family for the next generation of success. I'm proud of you for finally seeing what I've seen all along. That girl was never going to be enough. Love, Mother. P.S. Do not tell your father the full plan. Stefan has gotten soft in his old age. He might object to the public nature of Thursday's event. What he doesn't understand is that public humiliation is necessary. It ensures she'll never try to come back, never try to claim she wasn't aware of what she was signing. This needs to be definitive. I stood in our bedroom, Damien's phone in my hands, and felt something shift inside my chest. Not sadness. Not even anger anymore. Clarity. They'd planned this for weeks. Victoria had crafted a speech designed to destroy me in front of everyone I loved. Damien had coordinated timing down to the minute. Jeremy had brought champagne to celebrate my exile. Margaret had rigged a briefcase camera to record my breakdown. And they'd done it all while I'd already filed for divorce. While I'd already secured Eleanor's shares. While I'd already documented their embezzlement. While I'd already positioned myself to dismantle their entire empire. They were planning my humiliation at a dinner where I would actually be destroying them. The irony was almost beautiful. I returned Damien's phone to his nightstand, the screen going dark exactly as I set it down. He stirred slightly, rolling over, his hand reaching for my side of the bed. "Cassie," he mumbled, half asleep. "I'm here," I whispered, sliding back under the covers. "Good," he said, his voice thick with sleep. "Can't sleep without you there." The lie was so casual, so automatic, he probably didn't even realize he'd told it. I lay in the darkness, listening to him drift back to sleep, and thought about Thursday. About the speech Victoria would give. About the envelope Damien would present. About the pen Margaret would offer. About the leather portfolio I would slide across the table in response. About the moment Victoria's face would change when she realized what I'd done. 6 more days. I could be patient for 6 more days. I'd been patient for 5 years. What was less than a week? I closed my eyes and smiled in the darkness. Thursday couldn't come fast enough. Thanksgiving Day, November 24th, 2 p.m. The morning started with Damien watching me from the bedroom doorway as I got dressed. I'd chosen my outfit carefully the night before, the burgundy silk dress from Soho, elegant pearl earrings that had been my grandmother's, simple heels. Nothing flashy. Nothing that screamed desperation or defiance. Just a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. "You look nice," Damien said, his tone almost wistful. For a moment, I saw a flash of the man I'd married, the one who'd spent 3 hours in my gallery talking about art. Then his phone buzzed with a text from Jeremy, and the mask slid back into place. "We should leave by 4. Mom wants us there early." "Of course," I said, fastening my earrings with steady hands. "I made those bourbon pecan tarts she likes. They're already packed." He blinked, surprised. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to." I smiled at him in the mirror. "It's Thanksgiving. Family should be together." Something flickered across his face, guilt, maybe, or discomfort. But it passed quickly, replaced by the entitled confidence he'd worn for months. "I'll bring the car around," he said, retreating from the room. After he left, I opened my closet and pulled out the Bottega Veneta portfolio. Inside, every document was arranged in perfect order, my divorce filing on top, then the forensic accounting, the email evidence, the stock certificates, Eleanor's letter, the offshore account statements, and finally my counterfiling. Each page was a bullet. Together, they were an arsenal. I placed the portfolio in a sleek black bag, zipping it closed. Then I texted Evelyn, on my way to Greenwich. Phone fully charged. Her response came immediately, charged and ready. "I'll be recording everything. Love you. Destroy them." Marcus Hayes, my private investigator, sent his own message, in position in the garden. Long-range audio active. "I've got clear sight lines to the dining room through the French doors. Whatever happens, I'll capture it." Caroline Chen's text was simple: "The court filing is official and on record. You have legal standing. Whatever happens tonight, you're protected. Good luck." I looked at myself one final time in the full-length mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the same person who'd married Damien 5 years ago. That woman had been hopeful, naive, willing to believe love could bridge any gap. This woman was harder. Smarter. Patient enough to wait for the perfect moment to strike. "Let's go," I whispered to my reflection. 4:15 p.m., arriving at the Greenwich estate. The Germaine house stood like something from a magazine spread, 3 stories of stone and glass overlooking Long Island Sound, worth approximately $12 million. Victoria had inherited it from her parents, old Connecticut money that predated even the Germaine fortune. Cars were already lining the circular driveway. My parents' modest Honda Accord looked tiny next to Jeremy's Range Rover and Victoria's Mercedes G-Wagon. I felt a surge of protective anger on their behalf. They'd raised me with love and integrity, values that apparently meant nothing in this world of imported marble and designer furniture. "Ready?" Damien asked, his hand on my lower back as we approached the front door. The gesture looked affectionate to anyone watching, but I felt the tension in his fingers, the slight pressure that was more control than comfort. "Ready," I said. Victoria opened the door herself, resplendent in cream Chanel and enough jewelry to fund a small country. Her smile was radiant, victorious, the expression of someone about to win a war. Cassie. Damien. Come in, come in. Everyone's gathering in the living room. Her eyes swept over me, taking in the dress, the modest jewelry, the understated appearance. I saw the satisfaction in her gaze. She thought I'd dressed to shrink, to disappear, to make her job easier. She had no idea I'd dressed for war. The living room was already full. My parents stood awkwardly near the fireplace, my father in his best suit, 20 years old but well-maintained, my mother in a dress from Macy's that she'd probably agonized over for weeks. They looked uncomfortable among the designer-clad Germaines, and my heart ached seeing them try so hard to belong in a room that would never accept them. Evelyn caught my eye from across the room, her phone already positioned casually in her hand. She gave me the tiniest nod. Recording had started. Jeremy was pouring drinks at the bar, his movements just a touch too eager. Stefan sat in a leather armchair reading the Wall Street Journal, or pretending to. I noticed he hadn't turned a page in several minutes. When Victoria made another cutting remark about appropriate standards, I caught him closing his eyes briefly, as if in pain. Damien's Aunt Martha and Uncle Richard had claimed the sofa, making polite small talk with my parents that clearly pained everyone involved. And then there was Madeline. She stood near the French doors, backlit by the afternoon sun streaming across the sound, looking like she'd been positioned there deliberately for maximum visual impact. Her dress was Valentino. I recognized it from the fall runway show Victoria had attended. The tennis bracelet caught the light with every gesture. She smiled at me, the expression pitying and superior. Cassie, how lovely to see you. That dress is so charming. Very, understated. Thank you, I said warmly, as if I'd genuinely received a compliment. You look beautiful. That bracelet is stunning. Her hand moved instinctively to touch it. Oh, this? It was a gift. I'm very fortunate. You have no idea, I murmured, moving past her toward my parents. My mother embraced me tightly, whispering in my ear, "Are you all right, sweetheart? You seem different." "I'm perfect, Mom," I whispered back. "Just trust me tonight, okay? No matter what happens, trust me." She pulled back, searching my face with concerned eyes, but nodded slowly. 6 p.m., gathering for dinner. Victoria's voice rang out like a bell. "Everyone, dinner is served. Please find your seats in the dining room." The table was even more elaborate than I'd seen on Sunday. 18 place settings arranged with military precision, each one a small fortune in china and crystal and silver. Candles flickered in sterling silver holders. Floral arrangements, imported orchids that probably cost more than my father made in a week, dominated the center. And there, at the far end of the table, was my seat. Isolated from the main conversation areas, positioned so I'd have to speak loudly to be heard, marked with a place card in Victoria's elegant calligraphy, Cassandra. Not Cassie. Not Mrs. Germaine. Just my full name, formal and distancing. Madeline's place card was positioned 5 seats from Damien. Close enough to be in his line of sight. Far enough to maintain plausible deniability. Margaret, Victoria's attorney, sat 2 seats from me, her leather briefcase positioned carefully by her feet. I could see the slight bulge where the camera lens was hidden. Everyone took their seats. My father held my mother's chair. Stefan did the same for Victoria, the only gentlemanly gesture I'd ever seen him make. Jeremy sprawled in his seat with casual arrogance. And Damien sat at Victoria's right hand, the position of honor, looking down the table at me with an expression that was pure confidence. Victoria stood, tapping her champagne flute with a silver knife. The crystal rang out clearly, commanding immediate silence. "Before we begin our Thanksgiving meal," she said, her voice warm and authoritative, "I want to welcome everyone to our home. Family, both blood and extended, is what makes occasions like this meaningful." She looked directly at me, her smile sharpening. "And sometimes, family requires us to make difficult decisions. To acknowledge hard truths. To do what's best for everyone, even when it's painful. My father's hand found my mother's under the table. Evelyn's phone was angled perfectly to capture Victoria's face. Marcus's long-range audio equipment was recording every word through the French doors. And I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, my leather bag positioned carefully by my feet, waiting. Victoria continued, "Before we give thanks for our many blessings, I need to address something that has weighed heavily on my heart." She was starting her speech. The one about the barista with delusions of adequacy. The one designed to humiliate me in front of everyone I loved. I watched her face, so confident, so certain of her victory. And I smiled. Just a small smile, barely visible, but enough that Evelyn caught it and knew. The real show was about to begin. Victoria's voice filled the dining room like a judge pronouncing sentence. 5 years ago, my son married a woman I hoped would rise to meet the standards of the Germaine family. A barista with dreams of significance, with delusions that love alone could bridge the gap between her ordinary background and our family's legacy. My mother's hand tightened on her fork. My father's jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle jumping. Evelyn's eyes blazed, but she kept her phone steady, recording every word. I gave her time, Victoria continued, her gaze sweeping the table before landing on me with surgical precision. I gave her opportunities. I gave her every chance to prove she belonged in our world. But some people are simply not equipped for the lives they aspire to. She paused for effect, letting the words sink in. Madeline looked down at her plate, uncomfortable despite herself. Stefan had gone very still. Even Jeremy looked slightly uneasy, as if hearing the words spoken aloud made them more cruel than they'd seemed in planning. Some people are meant for smaller lives. Smaller ambitions. And there's no shame in that, it's simply who they are. My father stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood. "Now wait just a... Dad." My voice cut through his anger, calm and clear. "It's okay. Let her finish." He stared at me, confusion and fury warring on his face. But something in my expression made him slowly sink back into his chair. Victoria's eyebrow arched slightly, surprised I hadn't already broken down, but she pressed forward. "Cassie, dear, you are not a bad person. You are simply an ordinary person who found herself in an extraordinary situation. And it's time, for your sake and for Damien's, that we acknowledge this truth." She gestured to Damien, who stood on cue, reaching into his jacket pocket. His movements were confident, rehearsed. "You deserve a life that doesn't require you to constantly stretch beyond your capabilities," Victoria continued, her voice dripping with false compassion. "And my son deserves a partner who can stand beside him without compromise." Damien walked the length of the table, his footsteps echoing. 18 pairs of eyes watched him place the envelope in front of me. "Cassie," he said, and his voice was steady, certain. "This is for the best. For both of us. You'll see that in time." I looked at the envelope, then up at him. His eyes met mine with complete confidence. "So tonight," Victoria concluded, "we're offering you a gift. The gift of release. The gift of returning to a life that fits. Papers have been prepared. Terms have been made generous. All you need to do is sign." Margaret stood smoothly, pulling a Mont Blanc pen from her jacket. She placed it beside the envelope with practiced precision. "Mrs. Germaine, if you'll just sign where indicated, we can finalize this matter quickly and quietly." The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the antique clock ticking on the mantel, the distant sound of waves against the shore, my own heartbeat steady and strong. I picked up the envelope, opened it slowly, and pulled out the papers. I scanned them briefly. Property division, nothing. Spousal support, denied. $50,000 settlement payment contingent on immediate signature and non-disclosure agreement. "May I borrow that pen?" I asked Margaret politely. She handed it to me, a small smile playing at her lips. Victory smile. The smile of someone who thinks they've won. I clicked the pen open and signed my name in smooth, decisive strokes on the signature line. Cassandra Marie Holden. Not Holden Germaine. Just Holden. The name I was born with. Victoria actually laughed, the sound sharp with triumph. Well. That was easier than expected. Damien, I told you she'd fold immediately. She knows when she's outmatched. Jeremy raised his water glass in a mock toast, grinning openly. I need to get something, I said quietly, reaching down for my leather bag. Oh, there's no need for dramatics, Victoria said, already reaching for the champagne bottle beside her place setting, the Chateau Latour 1982 Jeremy had mentioned in his email. What's done is done, dear. You can collect your things from the apartment next week. We've already arranged for. I placed the Bottega Veneta portfolio on the table with a soft thud that somehow echoed louder than it should have. Victoria's hand paused on the champagne bottle. Your turn to read, I said simply. My turn for what? Victoria's tone was still confident, but something had shifted in her eyes. A flicker of uncertainty. To read the documents I brought for you. The room had gone preternaturally quiet. Even the clock seemed to have stopped ticking. Victoria opened the portfolio with the same confidence she'd brought to this entire performance. Margaret leaned in to look, her professional smile still in place. Then it faltered. The first document was clearly labeled at the top, Petition for Divorce, Holden vs. Germaine, filed November 18, 2024, New York County Supreme Court. Victoria's eyes scanned the page, once, twice, her face draining of color. This says, you filed November 18th. 6 days ago, I confirmed. Before you planned to serve me tonight. Margaret snatched the document, her eyes moving rapidly across the legal text. This is official. Court stamped. You filed first. What does that mean? Damien's voice was uncertain suddenly, looking to his mother for guidance. It means, I said calmly, reaching over to turn to the second document in the portfolio, that according to the prenuptial agreement your mother had drawn up, specifically Clause 7.3 regarding fraud and misconduct, whoever files first in cases of proven financial fraud determines the asset division terms. I looked directly at Victoria. I filed first. Which means my terms take precedence over anything you plan tonight. Victoria's hand shook as she turned to the second document. The Forensic Accounting Report, 53 pages detailing every illegal transfer, every shell corporation, every offshore account. Germaine Industries Financial Analysis, she read aloud, her voice hollow. Systematic embezzlement totaling $2.7 million over 18 months by Damien Germaine and Jeremy Germaine through the following shell corporations. That's not, we didn't. Jeremy was on his feet, his face going from smug to panicked in seconds. Keep reading, I suggested gently. The third document was the email chain. Victoria's own words printed in black and white, I know about the borrowing from the company accounts. The $50,000 we're paying Cassie to go away should help cover the gaps. Margaret had gone pale. Victoria, this email is from your corporate account. With your digital signature. This is fabricated, Victoria said, but her voice lacked conviction. How did you even? Jeremy uses his birthday as his password for everything, I said. Including the guest Wi-Fi network I've been connecting to every Sunday for months. Once I was on your network, accessing corporate emails was remarkably simple. Stefan spoke for the first time all evening, his voice quiet but cutting. Victoria. Is this true? Did you know they were stealing from the company? She didn't answer, her hands rifling through the remaining documents with increasing desperation. The stock certificates came next. Eleanor Germaine's signature, clear and authenticated, transferring 40% of Germaine Industries to me. Dated 2 years ago. No, Victoria whispered. No, Eleanor wouldn't, she couldn't. She did, I said. Because she knew what you were. What you were doing to this company and to this family. She gave me these shares to protect her legacy from you. I looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. 40%. More than Victoria's 35%. Enough to call an emergency board meeting. Enough to demand a full investigation. Enough to vote for new leadership. Damien had sunk back into his chair, his face the color of old paper. Cassie, wait, we can talk about this. I'm not finished. I turned to the next document. This is the evidence of your affair with Madeline Duff. Text messages, photographs, credit card receipts for hotels and jewelry. 18 months of documented infidelity. Madeline stood abruptly, her chair clattering backward. I didn't know, he said. You two had an understanding. We didn't, I said simply. I pulled out another document, looking at Madeline with something close to pity. And before you think you're special, these are the messages between Damien and Jeremy discussing how you're fun for now, but ultimately, too ambitious to be a real long-term option. Apparently, the plan was to use you to get access to your father's shipping contracts, then trade you in for someone more manageable. Madeline's hand flew to her mouth. She looked at Damien with betrayal written across her face. The final document, I continued, pulling out the last pages, is my counterfiling. Not just for divorce, but for fraud, theft, and emotional damages. With Eleanor's shares and the evidence of embezzlement, I'm calling for an emergency board meeting next Monday. The board will vote on removing Victoria as CEO pending criminal investigation. I closed the portfolio and looked directly at Victoria. Her carefully constructed composure had completely shattered. She looked older suddenly, diminished, the powerful CEO facade crumbling to reveal something desperate underneath. According to Clause 7.3 of the prenuptial agreement, I said clearly, in cases of proven fraud where the injured party files first, I'm entitled to 75% of all shared marital assets. The Greenwich penthouse, the investment accounts, the Martha's Vineyard property, Damien's pension and retirement funds. That's approximately $8.5 million. My father made a choking sound. My mother's hand was pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. But more importantly, I continued, with my 40% of Germaine Industries, I now have more power in this company than you do, Victoria. And I intend to use it to expose every illegal transaction, every hidden account, every corrupt decision you've made. Victoria's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Her perfectly made-up face had drained of color so completely she looked like a wax figure. Happy Thanksgiving, I said quietly. I believe we have a lot to discuss. The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. Then everything erupted. You conniving little, Jeremy lunged forward, but Stefan's hand shot out, grabbing his son's arm with surprising strength. Sit down, Stefan said, his voice harder than I'd ever heard it. You've done enough damage. Dad, she's lying. This is all. Jeremy's protest died when Stefan turned to look at him with an expression of pure disgust. Are you? Are you lying about the embezzlement? Stefan's question hung in the air. Jeremy's silence was answer enough. Victoria finally found her voice, though it came out strangled. Cassandra, if this is about money, we can negotiate. The $50,000 was just an opening offer. We can be more generous. Much more generous. This isn't a negotiation, I said calmly. This is a consequence. Margaret had pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. I need to call the firm. Victoria, I can't represent you in this. There's a clear conflict of interest now, and if criminal charges are filed. You're abandoning me? Victoria's voice rose, cracking. I've given your firm millions in billable hours. And I'm not going to prison for you, Margaret said flatly, already gathering her briefcase, the one with the hidden camera that had been meant to record my humiliation. I'll have my partners contact you about transitioning your cases to other attorneys. She walked out, her heels clicking against the marble floor like gunshots. Madeline was next. She stood, her face blotchy with tears and rage, and threw her napkin on the table. You told me she didn't matter. You said your marriage was over and everything but paperwork. Damien finally looked at her, his face pale. Madeline, please, I can explain. Don't. She yanked the tennis bracelet off her wrist and threw it at him. It bounced off his chest and skittered across the table, landing in the cranberry sauce. $8,400, right? That's what you paid for it? While telling me you loved me? While making plans for our future? It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. Madeline grabbed her purse, looking at me with something between respect and horror. I'm sorry. I genuinely didn't know. If I had known. You would have done the same thing anyway, I said, not unkindly. But you're young. You'll recover. Just pick better men next time. She left without another word, and I heard her car engine roar to life moments later, tires squealing on the driveway. Victoria turned on Damien, her voice low and venomous. This is your fault. If you'd managed your wife properly, if you'd kept her in line like I told you. Managed me? I repeated, my voice sharp enough to cut through her tirade. Like a dog? Like your son told his friends I needed to be trained? Damien flinched as if I'd struck him. That's right, I continued, pulling out my phone and playing the audio recording. His voice filled the room. It's about consistency. Like training a dog. Clear boundaries, immediate corrections when she steps out of line, rewards when she behaves. My mother gasped. My father stood again, his hands balled into fists. 5 years, I said, stopping the recording. 5 years of being told I wasn't enough. That I needed to be fixed. That I should be grateful for the scraps of affection you threw my way. Did you really think I would just accept it forever? Cassie, I'm sorry, Damien started, but I held up my hand. Don't. Your apologies are 5 years too late and completely meaningless. I looked at Victoria. And you? You built this family on cruelty and control and the assumption that money could buy anything, including people's dignity. But you made one critical mistake. What mistake? Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. You underestimated me. You thought I was weak because I was kind. You thought I was stupid because I was quiet. You thought I would break because I'd been bending. I stood slowly, gathering my portfolio. But I wasn't bending. I was documenting. I was planning. I was waiting for the perfect moment to take everything. I looked around the table at the wreckage of the Thanksgiving dinner. The cold turkey, the untouched wine, the shattered family dynamic. Evelyn, Mom, Dad, we're leaving. My family stood immediately. My father put his arm around my mother, who was crying openly now. Evelyn grabbed her coat, her phone still recording, capturing every moment. You can't just leave, Victoria said, her voice rising with panic. We need to discuss the company, the shares, the... My attorney will be in touch Monday morning, I said. Caroline Chen at Chen and Associates. I'm sure you'll find her rate significantly higher than Margaret's, but then again, she's actually competent. Stefan spoke again, still seated, looking at Victoria with something like betrayal. Did you know? About the embezzlement? Did you help them steal from my mother's company? Victoria's silence was damning. Get out, Stefan said quietly. Victoria, Damien, Jeremy, get out of my mother's house. This is my house, Victoria protested. Eleanor left it to me in her will. Actually, I said, pausing at the doorway, Eleanor's will had a clause. If you were ever found to have engaged in financial impropriety involving Germaine Industries, the house reverts to the company trust. Since I now control 40% of that trust and Stefan controls another 25%, we can vote to enforce that clause. I smiled, the expression holding no warmth. You'll want to start packing. I'd suggest finding somewhere to stay within the next 30 days. Victoria's legs seemed to give out. She sank into her chair, her perfect posture finally collapsing. Jeremy was on his phone, probably calling a lawyer. Damien just stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. How long? He asked finally. How long have you been planning this? Since the moment I overheard you and Jeremy making bets on how badly I'd break down tonight, I said. Though honestly, Damien, you've been giving me reasons for much longer than that. We walked through the foyer, past the imported marble and designer furniture and all the trappings of wealth that had once intimidated me. Now they just looked empty. cold. As hollow as the family that had accumulated them. Outside, the November air was crisp and clean. The sun was setting over Long Island Sound, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. My father's Honda Accord sat in the driveway, modest and reliable, next to the luxury vehicles that cost more than most people's houses. "Cassie," my mother said, pulling me into a tight embrace. "Why didn't you tell us what was happening?" "Because I needed you to be genuinely surprised tonight. If you'd known, Victoria would have seen it on your faces." I held her tightly, breathing in her familiar perfume, drugstore brand, nothing fancy, but it smelled like home. "I'm sorry I put you through that." "Are you kidding?" Evelyn said, her voice fierce. "That was the most badass thing I've ever witnessed. I got everything on video. Every word of Victoria's speech, every document you revealed, every moment of their faces falling." My father hadn't spoken yet. He just looked at me, his eyes shining with tears he was trying to hold back. "Dad? I'm proud of you," he said, his voice thick. "And I'm sorry. Sorry I didn't see what they were doing to you. Sorry I didn't protect you." "You taught me how to protect myself," I said. "You and Mom showed me what real love looks like. What respect looks like. That's how I knew what I was experiencing wasn't normal. Wasn't acceptable." He pulled me into a hug that smelled like hardware store, sawdust and metal and honest work. "You're coming home with us tonight. No arguments." I wasn't planning to argue. We got into our separate cars, me in my Audi, my family in their Honda. As I pulled out of the driveway, I looked back at the Greenwich estate one final time. Through the dining room windows, I could see them still frozen at the table. Victoria with her head in her hands. Stefan standing over her, his posture radiating anger. Damien staring at his empty plate. Jeremy on his phone, probably getting terrible news from whatever lawyer he'd called. The family that had tried to break me was breaking instead. And I felt nothing but relief. I followed my family's taillights toward Hartford, toward my childhood home, toward people who loved me for exactly who I was. Behind me, the Germaine empire burned. And ahead of me, finally, was freedom. The following week. The calls started Monday morning. 12 missed calls from Damien by noon. 8 from Jeremy. 3 from Victoria's new attorney, her 4th since Thanksgiving, the first 3 having withdrawn after reviewing the evidence. I blocked all their numbers without listening to the voicemails. Caroline Chen's text was more welcome, emergency board meeting scheduled for Wednesday. Victoria's interim replacement named this morning. Criminal investigation officially opened by state prosecutors. You're winning. On Tuesday, the New York Post ran a small item in their business section. Germaine Industries CEO Victoria Germaine steps down amid internal investigation. The article was careful, legally vetted, but the implication was clear. By Wednesday, the story had grown. The Wall Street Journal picked it up. Family business drama. Embezzlement allegations rock Connecticut dynasty. I stayed at my parents' house in Hartford, sleeping in my childhood bedroom with its faded wallpaper and creaky floorboards. My mother made my favorite meals. My father sat with me in the evenings, not talking, just being present. Evelyn came by every night, bringing wine and solidarity. "Have you seen the Reddit threads?" she asked on Thursday, a week after Thanksgiving. "You're like a folk hero. Woman takes down entire corporate dynasty with single portfolio, is trending." "I don't want to be trending," I said. "I just want it to be over." But it wasn't over yet. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. The penthouse had to be dealt with. Damien had moved out, to where, I didn't know or care, but his things were still there. Our things. 5 years of a life that had never really been mine. I brought Evelyn and Marcus for support. The doorman barely looked at me as we entered, but I caught his small smile. Word had spread, apparently. The apartment looked exactly as I'd left it. Sterile. Cold. Expensively empty. "Take whatever you want," I told Evelyn, gesturing at the furniture Victoria had selected. "The rest can go to charity." What I did take: my paintings from the hidden closet. My grandmother's china from the back of the kitchen cabinet. The first edition Fitzgerald I'd given Damien for his birthday, still unread on his nightstand. What I left: everything else. As we were leaving, I found a letter on the kitchen counter. Damien's handwriting. Cassie. I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need to say it anyway. You were right. About everything. The therapy my lawyer made me start has helped me see what I couldn't before, or what I refused to see. How much of my mother I'd become. How much I'd hurt you. How much I'd failed the man I was when we met. I'm not asking for another chance. I know that's gone. I'm just asking that you know I'm sorry. Truly sorry. Not sorry I got caught. Sorry for what I did. For who I became. The gallery opening announcement came to the apartment yesterday. The Eleanor Gallery. She would have loved that. She would have been proud of you. I hope you build the life you deserve. I hope you find someone who sees you the way I should have seen you all along. Damien. I read it once, then folded it carefully and put it in my pocket. Not because I forgave him. Not because his apology changed anything. But because it was proof that I'd been right to leave. That the man I'd married had been buried so deep under Victoria's influence that it took losing everything for him to resurface. And by then, it was far too late. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving. The board meeting was private, but Caroline briefed me afterward in her office. Victoria was removed as CEO with a unanimous vote. Stefan abstained. The board appointed an interim CEO from outside the family, Marcus Wellington, formerly of Keller Industries. He's clean, competent, and has already started the forensic audit. She pulled up spreadsheets on her laptop. The embezzlement was worse than we thought. Nearly $4 million over 2 years, not 18 months. Jeremy and Damien face criminal charges. Victoria faces conspiracy charges and potential civil liability for her role in concealing the fraud. What about the company? I asked. Can it survive this? With your 40% and Stefan's 25% voting together? Yes. The company is fundamentally sound. The board is already implementing new oversight measures. Marcus is talking about taking it public in 2 years to increase transparency. Caroline closed her laptop. You did this, Cassie. You saved that company. I saved myself, I corrected. The company was just collateral benefit. 1 month after Thanksgiving, December 24th. Christmas Eve arrived without fanfare. I spent it with my parents in Hartford, helping my mother bake cookies, watching old movies with my father, feeling more at peace than I had in years. Around 8 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Germaine. Cassie, I know this is unexpected, but I wanted to reach out. What Victoria and my sons did to you was unforgivable. I should have seen it sooner. Should have stopped it. I'm sorry I failed you. Eleanor would be proud of what you've done, for yourself and for her company. If you're ever willing to attend a board meeting, your voice would be valued. But I understand if you'd rather remain a silent partner. Wishing you peace this holiday season. You've earned it. Stefan. I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, thank you, Stefan. I'll think about the board meetings. Merry Christmas. It wasn't forgiveness. Not exactly. But it was acknowledgement that not everyone in that family had been complicit. That Stefan had been trapped too, in his own way. 2 months after Thanksgiving, late January. The divorce was finalized on a gray Tuesday morning. I sat in the same courtroom where I'd filed 3 months earlier, watching Judge Patricia Reeves review the final settlement. 75% of marital assets to Mrs. Holden, totaling $8.5 million. Additional damages of $150,000 for documented emotional abuse and fraud. Mrs. Holden retains her 40% stake in Germaine Industries, valued at approximately $136 million. She looked up over her reading glasses. Mrs. Holden also receives the Martha's Vineyard property and Mr. Germaine's share of the Greenwich penthouse, which she may sell or occupy as she sees fit. She looked at Damien, who sat across the aisle with his attorney, his fifth since Thanksgiving. Mr. Germaine, you are prohibited from contacting Mrs. Holden for any reason not explicitly related to the dissolution of shared assets. Violation of this order will result in contempt charges. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Damien said, his voice barely audible. Then this divorce is finalized. She brought down her gavel with a sharp crack. Court is adjourned. I stood, my legs steadier than I'd expected. Caroline gathered her materials efficiently, a satisfied smile playing at her lips. Congratulations, she said. You're officially free. Damien remained seated as we walked past. I felt his eyes on me but didn't look back. There was nothing left to say. Outside the courthouse, Evelyn was waiting with coffee and a grin that could light up Manhattan. How does it feel? She asked. I took a deep breath of cold January air. Like I can finally breathe. 3 months after Thanksgiving, February. The criminal trials wouldn't happen for months, maybe years, but the civil settlements came quickly. Jeremy pleaded guilty to embezzlement and agreed to repay his share of the stolen funds. He got 3 years, eligible for parole in 18 months. Damien took a plea deal, 2 years, work release program, full restitution. His attorney had argued for leniency based on his cooperation with prosecutors and his genuine remorse. I didn't attend his sentencing. I didn't need to see him brought low. That wasn't what this had been about. Victoria's case was more complex. Her lawyers were fighting the conspiracy charges, claiming she'd been misled by her sons. The prosecutors weren't buying it, not with the email evidence showing her explicit knowledge and participation. Her trial was set for June. I'd probably have to testify. I wasn't looking forward to it, but I wasn't afraid either. 4 months after Thanksgiving, March. The gallery space in Tribeca was coming together. The floors had been refinished to a warm honey color. The walls were gallery white. Track lighting installed, adjustable and museum quality. I'd hired 3 employees, Sophie, a recent art history graduate who reminded me of myself at 23, Marcus's sister Elena, a gallery manager with 15 years of experience, and James, a part-time curator who specialized in emerging artists. The mission statement went on the wall by the entrance in elegant lettering. The Eleanor Gallery exists to showcase artists who haven't been seen, to amplify voices that haven't been heard, and to prove that art belongs to everyone, not just those who can afford it. Opening night was set for March 15th. I sent an invitation to Stefan. Not to Victoria, not to Damien or Jeremy. Just to Stefan, who'd been kind in his own quiet way. Who'd voted against his wife to save his mother's company. He RSVP'd yes. Opening night, March 15th. The Eleanor Gallery buzzed with energy. Over 200 people had come, collectors, artists, critics, friends, family. I'd showcased 12 emerging artists, their work covering the walls in explosions of color and emotion and raw talent. My parents stood near a massive abstract piece, my father reading the artist's statement with genuine interest. My mother had tears in her eyes as she looked around the space. Your grandmother would be so proud, she whispered, hugging me tightly. Evelyn was giving an impromptu tour to a group of her teacher friends, explaining the significance of each piece with enthusiasm that made the artists beam. Caroline Chen had come, bringing several clients who were serious collectors. You know, she said, examining a sculpture near the window, I might need to buy this for my office. How much? For you? It's a gift, I said. You gave me my life back. This is the least I can do. Stefan Germaine appeared near closing time, looking older but somehow lighter than I'd seen him in years. We stood together in front of a painting of a phoenix rising from flames. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I knew Victoria was difficult. I knew she was hard on you. But I didn't know the extent of it. I didn't protect you the way I should have. You voted to remove her as CEO, I said. You supported the board investigation. That counts for something. Damien asks about you sometimes, he said carefully. He's getting help. Real help. Says his therapist is helping him understand how he became what he became. I hope therapy helps him, I said, and meant it. But that's his journey now. Not mine. Stefan nodded, understanding. The company is doing better. Marcus Wellington is exactly what we needed, someone from outside the family, someone without baggage. The stock price is up 18% since we announced the restructuring. He paused. You're still welcome at board meetings, you know. Your 40% gives you a seat. I know. I'll attend the important votes. But I'm not interested in running Germaine Industries. I gestured to the gallery, to the art, to the life I'd built. This is mine. Completely mine. Stefan smiled, genuine warmth I'd rarely seen from him. Eleanor would approve. She always said the company needed to serve something larger than itself. Maybe having you as a shareholder will remind us of that. After he left, I stood in the center of my gallery, surrounded by art and friends and possibility, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not just relief. Not just freedom. Joy. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.